Right now I'm wearing glasses and my hair is tied up. So I'm half Filipino, half Vietnamese. So I have the kind of almond eyes, is it? Is that how you call it? And I'm brown skinned and I'm wearing a black, it's a black shirt. No, it's a black jacket. And Ewan, would you allow me to share my screen? I just want to show something.
Okay.
Okay. So what enabled me as a man to have this deconstruction of my life is this thing called orgasmic meditation. It's a practice. It's a goalless practice where a man or a woman strokes the clitoris of their partner for 15 minutes with no goal other than to feel what's there at that moment. And the practice, all in short, has a container. So each step is the same anywhere in the world. It's always 15 minutes. And it begins with, so me asking her, would you like to And then when she says yes, we do it. And then I first tell her I'm gonna touch her thighs now. And then she'll say, yes, thank you. And I'll do a noticing step where I notice one or two things about her yoni or her pussy and describe it to her. And she'll say, thank you. And then I put on the lube and the gloves. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to touch her pussy now. She says, yes, thank you. And then I stroke. I stroke for 13 minutes. And all the while I'm stroking, I can make offers. I could say, would you like a faster stroke? Would you like a slower stroke? Do you want it more to the right? At the same time, she could also make adjustments. She could say faster, slower. Can you move your finger a millimeter to the left? So there's an adjustment all the while this is happening. And then at the 13-minute mark, there'll be a bell. So there's a timer. We use this thing called Insight Timer, a meditation timer for the practice. There'll be a bell at 30 minutes, and I'm going to tell her 2 minutes. That means that we have 2 minutes to calm down, both of us. And then with the last 2 minutes, I will stroke down. And then I'm going to get the towel, wipe her pussy, cover it. And at the end, we share frames. And a frame is just, we're gonna say, there was a moment in the practice where I felt electricity running through my skin, or she would say, there was a moment in the practice, I felt heat in my pussy. So that's the practice. It's very precise, it's always like that. And it's not foreplay. I could break down each step in the process and tell you how it changed my life, because one of the principles of this practice is how I behave in the nest. The nest is the thing we create with the cushions and where the zafu where I sit. It's most likely how I behave in real life. It bleeds out into real life, because how I do one thing is how I do everything. So it's like when you might have heard this when you say, if you're dating someone, watch how they treat the wait staff, the people in the restaurant, because you will know that if they're rude to them, one day you'll see that part of them. So in the same way, in orgasmic meditation, I learned I do it from my desire. Like either one of us can ask, would you like to but I do it if I have the desire to So I do it because I want to do the practice, not because I want to fuck her or I want her to suck my dick. It's not leading to something else. That's why it's called the goalless practice. It's not a stepping stone. The thing is the thing itself, the meditation itself. And then how that helps me in life is, my practice now is, everything I do now, I want to do it. Like I'm speaking here right now because I want to do it. Not because I want to get a job from Martha or there's not, or I want something else. It's because I want to speak. I want to share this thing. And it's made my life much more joyful because if, for example, if I go to a party and then it's not joyful, I'll just leave because it's not my desire to. And in as a man, it also helps me to receive the no, because in when the partner, when I ask someone, would you like to and she says no, no thank you, I'll just say thank you, end of discussion. Whereas in the past, why did she say no, blah blah blah, oh maybe it's a yeah. None of that. It's clear. If it's no, it's a no, but then I can ask her again. And over time I've learned that some, or if not most of the women I know, somehow test the men as well. Just say no and see how you behave, which is very logical, very clever. If a person cannot take a no, then I don't want to be that person. But if he's gracious, then I can ask again, and then she might say yes. In fact, I learned this practice in Paris, and then I first practiced in London, and I knew no one. So everyone I asked at first said no, 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 no. And I just learned to receive that graciously and say thank you, thank you. And then slowly someone said yes, and then it built up, and then I practiced continuously since 2014, and I practiced all over the world. I haven't really counted how many women I practiced with, but if I count, it will be more than 100 now, different women over time. So there's that aspect of being a yes, full yes if I'm going to do something, and also having her yes as well and receiving the no. And also, before I did this, I've done seated meditation, where I focus on the third eye, the chakras. That's hard enough, but this is even harder because I'm meditating with another person and I'm actually touching the most intimate part of her. And women have this strong limbic system because in evolution, she has to take care of the children. So she needs to scan the environment all the time. If she's not safe, she'll feel it. So if I'm touching her clitoris and holding her vagina or her yoni, if I check out, if for the 15 minutes I think about something else or someone else, she will feel it. It's instantaneous. It's really, for 15 minutes, it's one of the most, I call it like meditating. It's like the extreme sport of meditation because there's no room to check out because there's another person there. Whereas if I'm meditating with myself, most of the time I just think of something else and I remember, I'll go back. Doesn't mean that it's perfect all the time, but then she'll be there too, because it's interactive. It's happening in real time, and the clitoris moves, and each clitoris is different. And then there's the spot with the most sensation moves around a lot, and you have to feel that. So real attention is there, and it's also a delicate spot. So it's like stroking my eyelid. So I learned from that as a man that sometimes it's not about force, it's about attention. And also I learned to focus on what's there, because each time I do this practice, even with the same person, it's different each time. Even if you do it one session and another session in the same day, it's 15 minutes, and then I ask her, would you like to and then it's never the same. I've never had the same ever since I started. So I'm forced to be always in the present. And that's really heightens pleasure. Because before this, I'm more about chasing. It's like, oh, I want this thing. Or I want, whether it be like, I want that woman, or I want this car, or I want this job. It's chasing. But then I get it. I don't really enjoy it, and I'm not on to the next thing. What's the next thing? Or I kiss her. Like, in high school, base one, kiss and then touch the boobs and then touch, there's like this, bam, 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 bam. And then even having sex, you have the foreplay, and then You climb this cliff and then boom, and then it's boom, and then just sleep. But then with I've learned about this more traditionally, what we call feminine orgasm. But nowadays it's less binary. We just call it this more like I call it complex orgasm. In another talk, I call it master chef orgasm, where it's more complex. It can turn on a dime, it can change, it can move. So in life, I've lived my life like that now as well. It's like before I was a lawyer, I had this thing, gone for partnership, but I wasn't happy. Get the apartment, get the girl, have kids. It's a very Asian thing, half Vietnamese, half Filipino. But then I wasn't really happy and I couldn't see myself doing that. So I smashed it all up. I studied again and traveled the world and I'm still exploring. So I'm not saying it's all perfect. There are hard times. There are times where I said, shit, should I have remained a lawyer? I would have much more money now. But I'm happy to say that because of having done this, I still do practice orgasmic meditation. I've met all these women in the world, and they've said that this has been a healing practice for them. Most of them say that, like it's like even some of them are happy to share in public, and even that's why I can share it. Is that they say that like no one's even the noticing part. No one has described my pussy to me. It's like apparently even they themselves don't look at their own pussy, and some of them even cry when I just because the container is to describe it in a neutral manner. I just describe the color, so no embellishment. So this is a very Zen practice. There's no music, there's no incense. It's always the same anywhere in the world, and I've done it. It's a very clean practice. And after the we detach. You don't have sex straight after. I mean, you can have sex if you're really partners or if you fall in love, but you separate it. Maybe do it after having at lunch or do it the next day. Keep it separate so that next time I ask her, would you like to she knows I only want But if you and then have sex afterwards, next time you ask her, do you want in her head, does she really want or does she want to have sex? Well, I want to but I don't want to have sex. So I'm just going to say no. So the practice dies. The regularity of the practice dies if you don't keep the container clean. And as a man, that is very powerful. So yeah, let's now move to questions. So I have a question. Well, I teach orgasmic meditation. There's some teachers around the world as well. Um, Full disclosure, unfortunately, the company that used to promote this big time has got some controversy, but now there's another institute. They've called it the IOM Institute, which is separate now from One Taste. So I don't know. There's been like most of the sexuality related teachings in the world are now mired in controversy. I don't know if it's a trend or what's going on. But I myself, I went to the coaching program. I went all the way, and I didn't really see the controversy, but maybe other people have different experiences. So, yeah. So the question is, yeah. Question: I can really see how this could be helpful for trauma healing as well as partners where sexuality has become stuck. Can you speak to that? Yeah. Now, yeah. In fact, it's quite common that we even gave it a name. We call it the shard glass feeling. Like a few women, when we start arming, it's painful. It's even painful to touch the clitoris. And it takes a long time it's like thawing, It's either that or sometimes the clitoris is so sensitive that there were a few partners I had in the past. They said, I just stroke the air, I don't even touch clitoris until she gets used to. Yeah. So another thing is there's a lot of details here. Like even entering her field, it's slow. It's really this is all about slow. In fact, my teacher, Nicole Dedan, wrote this book called Slow Sex. It's really about slowness and even approaching and putting my hands on her thigh. You approach it slowly so that she's not shocked into it. That's why there's a safe parting. I'm gonna touch your thighs now. Just don't do it. So and I also speak to, yeah, I had a few. I have a few partners where they were doing it with their husbands in the same community, but they weren't. They you could monogamously, just the two of them, but most people with other people, and some of them share that like they've been in like marriages where the sex is just dried up, and this somehow opens it up, and 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 to her, she was receiving pleasure, but with no strings attached. It's not like I'm going to steal her from her husband. You know what I mean? So to them, and also she in a way, yeah. One of the other thing that is counterintuitive is most people think that I'm doing things to her. No, her orgasms, the stroker's orgasm is hers. In fact, as the stroker, I'm in the surrendered position. Because whenever she adjusts, I would just have to do what she says. It's very empowering for women to do this. But the question, what about people who don't have a clit? Well, there's two answers to that. One answer is there's other practices geared towards men, like the Rainbow Rub with Joseph Kramer, and also there's a corresponding for men. But when I was learning it, it was a bit de-emphasized. Although people do it, it wasn't the emphasis of the school because according to Nicole, and I agree with her, most of society is already geared towards pleasuring men. You know what I mean? Or the porn industry. So there's enough attention there. It's good to have more attention on this side. And I agree with her. And also, in a weird kind of way, the more I relaxed into this, the more sex I had. It's weird. Like when I was pursuing sex, it wasn't happening. But when I was in service, it was happening more. It's a bit paradoxical, And so that's one part of the answer to what about people who don't have a clit? The other answer is an anecdotal one. When I was in San Francisco, I did with someone who transitioned from a man to a woman. And she had the operation and she showed me how to stroke her because they created a kind of clit-like nerve ending, and she was oming, so it worked. Yep. Is there something like this but for men? Yeah, there is Rainbow Rub. In fact, I've done it with another stroker here in Sydney. So we're both men and we stroke each other, and then we talked about it afterwards. It's like the same. It's, you know what I mean? It's like, which is true because we both have the feminine and the masculine. So when we were doing it, it was just like when it's the same. It's just a different organ, but it's the same energy. It's the same respect. It's the same container. So, yeah.
So do both people? So both people are considered in the meditation, like in the state of meditation.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for reminding me. Another key insight I had related to this is, before I learned all this, there's always this thing: am I getting mine? Is she getting hers? It's like, and me, I'm Libra. My zodiac or my solar return sign is Libra, and I'm always, when people ask me what do you want, whatever you want, and most Asians, so yeah, I'll just go with the flow. But then the thing with that is, when I lived in Omaha, I said, I want to know what you want, because if you don't tell me what you want, I don't know who you are. So it's not about, it's either she's getting hers or he's getting. It's about the third. So this is when we're oming, I'm stroking, and then she's feeling her orgasm through her clit. The two of us are like in the dark room. We're both feeling our way riding together. That's why at the end we share a frame, and most of the time the frames kind of correspond, because the longer we practice, we can be very specific. There was a moment in the practice, 2/3 in the practice, where I was stroking fast, that I felt this, and she'll go, "Yeah, at that same moment I felt this." So we're riding the same wave. It's a shared space, the third space, and it works well with relationships as well. It's not about it's your turn now, it's my turn now. No, we're feeling this, like there's me, there's you, but there's the relationship. The focus is not me or you, neither me or you, but the relationship between us. So it's the same with this one. This is always the first question I get from men is, what do you get out of it? You know, it's not about that. It's a different another way of framing this is, if you look at it as a game, whoever surrenders first in this game always wins. It's a bit like the ice. When the ice is just given up, you just there's no way you can win, because you just slip off it. If I give up my game, oh, there's another thing, gold thing. One of the when a stroker first strokes, one of the first resistances they hit is when the stroke is giving a lot of adjustments, and then I went through this. I go, but she's not letting me drive. She's not letting me, she's not letting me control the thing. And then she said, like, hang on, weren't you complaining that you don't know what women want? You always complain about, oh, I don't know what women. Now she's telling you specifically what she wants, and you're still complaining. And then it's like, whoa, that's true. She is actually telling me directly what she wants. She wants it faster. She wants it a millimeter. I should be saying, oh my God, thank you so much. I don't have to guess. You're telling me. So there's a beauty in that, in having receiving adjustments and being, it's perfect. Because you tell me what you want. Oh, this is so good.
Any more questions? I was so intrigued earlier that I forgot to host the event. Sorry for letting you ask for your own questions. Okay, since we have no more questions, thank you, Oliver. Thank you so much. I was so intrigued. And it was really interesting, and I feel like there's a lot to think about. After, I think Martha said that she feels like tearing up. Yeah, there was something magical about it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
On that note, I think I need a break. Does anyone else need a break? Maybe we could go for a 5-minute break. And then we'll be back around 8 o'clock. Okay, see you guys then. Mm-hmm. Okay, everyone, welcome back. For our next speaker, we have Fazana Doctor, who will be speaking on sexual healing after female genital cutting, one Katna survivor's experience. Fazana, just tell me if I pronounced that wrongly. In this 15-minute presentation, author, psychotherapist, and #NFGM activist Fazana Doctor will talk about her experiences of activism, healing, and her sex and relationships column for survivors. Dear Massey, sorry. Yes, take it away. And remember to describe how you look like.
Yes, thank you. So thank you everybody for being here. So what do I look like? I'm a South Asian woman originally from India. So I have brown skin. I have a little bit of a fountain at the top of my head because I've pulled my hair up. I'm 50 years old. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else I can say. I'm not used to describing myself. This is such a good exercise. I'm gonna share my screen because I want to make sure I stay organized. Oh, my slides aren't showing up when I try to share. Let me just try this again.
Okay, try again. I needed to make you host.
Okay, cool. And there it is. Wonderful.
Okay, I see it now.
You can see it. Okay, so now I need to just do slideshow, right?
Yes.
Cool. Everyone can see that?
Yes,
Awesome.
all good.
Okay, great. So I just want to talk a little bit about where I come from as I talk about this issue. So I'm a survivor of Khatna, which is the word that we use in our community, in the Dawoodi Bohra community that I'm from. Dawoodi Bohras are a subsect of Shia Muslims and originating probably first from Yemen, but now in India and across the diaspora, across the world. We're a fairly insular kind of community, so many people haven't heard about us. I'm also an activist. I've been involved in these issues for about 6 years now. And I'm a psychotherapist. I do that in the afternoon, and in the morning, I'm a novelist. And I've been doing a lot of talking about this issue in the last while because the latest book that I wrote is a book about one character and how she deals with Khatna. So I like to put this slide up because I'm going to be talking about sexual violence, and I'm going to be sharing some information about what exactly is FGM, and a lot of people don't know. So, you know, whenever people feel triggered, you know, it's always good to get grounded. Sometimes trigger warnings make people brace and tighten everything up, including, you know, getting like, I Kegel basically is what I do. So try not to do that. Instead, plant your feet and breathe and just notice and, you know, generally take care of yourself. So what is FGMC? So female genital mutilation / cutting. And these terms are used interchangeably. And generally activists will use both terms because we want to include people who prefer mutilation or who prefer the term cutting. We want to make sure that people feel that they are part of this. So it's all procedures where there's partial or total removal of female external genitalia or other injury to the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. That's the UNICEF term. It's generally happening to minors and it happens without consent. There's 4 main types. However, there's no standardization because this happens mostly by amateur cutters. It is happening medically in some places too, but it often happens under duress. And so that's also where standardization can't happen, right? Because if somebody is kicking and screaming, it's going to be a different thing than if somebody is still. And in every community, there's a different word. So in my community, we say cuffs, we say khatna. You know, I know some of you are from Singapore, so I've also put the term for Singapore and in Indonesia and Malaysia. This is, if we had standardization, this is what it would look like. But remember, there's no standardization. So there's type 1, which refers to cutting the clitoral hood and or the clitoris. In my community, the focus is on the clitoral hood. But of course, you know, the space between the clitoral hood and the clitoris, especially on somebody who's really small, is very like minuscule. And so often there can be damage to the external part of the clitoris. Type 2 involves, can involve type 1 plus partial or total removal of the labia minora. And type 3 is often what happens in type 1 plus type 2, and then also a kind of narrowing and covering of the vaginal opening and fusing the labia together. And then type 4 is kind of like every other non-medical harmful thing that can happen. And we're learning about more and more types of type 4 because there has been this kind of Me Too movement that's been happening in the last, I would say, 5 years or so, where more people across the whole globe are talking about all of the various forms of FGM. So here's what we know so far. And remember that this is a very silenced, taboo subject. So there's lots of things we don't know. It happens in 92 countries and counting. The belief is that it happens to somebody who was assigned female at birth every 10 seconds. And based on statistics from 32 countries, at least 200 million are affected. And these are some myths I just like to bust. So this is not really about religion. Most religious leaders oppose it. Of course, there are fringy religious people who say that it's required. And in my own community, our religious head says it's required. This is not about culture. You know, sometimes people who are the proponents of maintaining these practices will say, it's our culture, we are allowed to do it. But we actually think of it as a social norm. And we have so many social norms that have changed over time. And really, if it's about culture, it's about patriarchy. And it happens across religious and cultural groups all around the world. So I'll tell you just a little bit more about how it happens in my community. So as I mentioned before, small insular Muslim community. This is a picture of me and my sister and one of our aunts wearing a rida, which is like the traditional dress that you would wear if you're going to a mosque. Some more Orthodox women, though, wear it all the time in public. And we're standing in front of a mosque that my great-great-grandfather built for his mother. And I always like to show this photo because religious practices are very fluid. So, you know, here I am, you know, not wearing religious garb, but I have had these moments where I also practice. And, you know, we come from a community that is very generous, very beautiful. Many of us are like there's been a lot of focus, at least, you know, in the history of our community. It's changing a little bit lately, but there's an emphasis on education of women. Like this is a beautiful community, and it also has this very harmful practice. So how it's practiced in our community is that around the age of 7, plus or minus a few years, for me it happened when I was 4, that's when it is done to a girl. And it's done because of the belief that it can control sexuality. And across the globe, this is why it's done. There's a belief that female sexuality must be controlled. And this is a way to somehow control it. And we have a religious head who insists that it must be done. And he is quite loved. And there's also a community dynamic in which you're not allowed to question anything. And if you question, you can be shunned. And within a community where there's a lot of interdependency, the community shunning can be quite harmful. You know, if you have a business in the community, and this has actually happened, someone can have a business in the community, their daughter might be speaking up about this on Facebook, that father who maybe owns the business will get a visit and be told, if she doesn't stay quiet, we will boycott your business. So that's an important community dynamic to notice. And most of the people who practice Khatna believe that it's harmless, like no sex education, right? So they believe that it's harmless, that it's just a normal thing. It's been happening intergenerationally for thousands of years. So like, what's the big deal is what they would say. And it's only been in the last 5-6 years that this has even entered into kind of mainstream discussion. Before that, nobody talked about it. Within families, you could have had it done within a family and nobody would have talked about it. You could have gone with your cousin. You and your cousin will never talk about it because, and this is my experience, when it's done, it's incredibly confusing and painful. You're usually told that you're going for ice cream or to a party. So then, you know, and you're taken by a family member to an amateur cutter or to a clinic. You don't know what's going on. And what you're told is nothing happened. Why are you crying? so gaslighting, and don't talk about this. You're not allowed to talk about this. And so there can be a lot of silence. And a lot of people will even suppress the memory. And if you are then a grown-up who has suppressed the memory, and then maybe your mother-in-law or somebody says, it's time to take your child, you're going to be in a bit of a state of a fog, perhaps, right? And in my case, how it worked, because I have a family that is quite, I would say, not very religious, and that's part of, I think, how it happened, is that when, we're a collectivist culture. And so, a parent might say, we're not going to do this to our child, but other relatives and elders will say, we know better. And we're going to save this child, and we're going to take care of this child. And this is how they would do it. So in my case, it happened without my parents knowing. I never told them. It was never discussed, all of that. So that's a little bit about how it happens. And of course, it's not harmless. Of course, it's not. So here's a couple of studies. In this one study, and I encourage people to go look up wespeakout.org. It's the organization I've been working with. 33% believe it has negatively impacted their sex life. And of course it does, right? It's like any form of sexual trauma. So these are some of the things that people said: low sex drive, inability to feel sexual pleasure. Sometimes there's oversensitivity in the clitoral area. So the thing you said, Oliver, earlier about that glass, broken glass, sometimes people can feel an oversensitivity and even pain. And, we know that the clitoris is this multi, I'm making, like, it's got many parts, and it's got, branches, right? And we know that nerves work in this very interesting way. So if you did have some damage to the external part, you can feel pain in other parts too, right? Further down the branch. SAYO is our sister organization. They've also done a study. 32% said they didn't even know if it impacted their sex life. And so that speaks to a lack of sex ed, right? Like, what do you compare it against? And 35% said they didn't even exactly know what exactly had been cut. So, maybe they've never looked at themselves in the mirror. Maybe they have never been encouraged to understand what genitalia can look like. And, of course, we know that female genitalia can look like, there's so much diversity, right, in what things look like. Oh. Oops, sorry. And if you're interested, go to these websites and you can find out more. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what has helped me in my own healing. So mindfulness has been really helpful. So I really like the idea of, slow sexuality. What I was able to do through learning mindfulness in my sexuality was that I could stop, I could pause if I got overwhelmed, if I felt unsafe, if my limbic system was detecting something, if I was in a state of suddenly feeling very small and young, pausing, waiting. This was something that I learned from a therapist, but Stacey Haynes has a great book on this. And then I had to teach my partner. And at first, I was struck by what Kat said, initially when you're figuring out these things, it's not pretty. Everybody cries, everybody overreacts, everybody gets scared, right? But we learned to just be like very neutral about the pausing, like, okay, yeah, we're going to take a breath. And then we're going to wait. We're going to see if we want to continue. I've done different forms of therapy. As a therapist, I'm in this very privileged position to be able to seek out different people, sometimes peers, and asking for a session or two if I know that they've got specific kinds of training. So somatic experiencing is one that I really love. Internal family systems therapy is great for working with the inner child. Janina Fisher's work has been really helpful. She, talks about how the traumatized part often doesn't know that we have survived and still expects the trauma to happen again, So think about how this works, perhaps you're lying down and you're in a very similar kind of body position as when the original trauma happened, right? So the traumatized part of us thinks, let's be on guard, let's brace, let's, dissociate, let's, all of that kind of stuff. So that was very helpful to me, because sometimes, there can be this notion of like, well, it happened, 45 years ago, like, what's wrong with you? But no, our body doesn't know. I needed to do some work around spirituality. What does it mean to be part of a community that is so beautiful in so many ways, but also does this? So also looking at ancestral wounds. I did some work with somebody who is like a kind of like a psychic therapist, looking at how could we also heal previous generations. And then, my ongoing activism has put me into contact with so many fabulous feminists, and we talk a lot, and that really helps. And then writing, writing 7, which is the novel that is about Katna, has really helped me, I think, in creating narrative where I didn't have narrative. I also began to understand more fully the perspectives of the people who believe in this practice. Lots of peer support has helped me. And then ongoing sex education, as a therapist, I thought that I was pretty good in this area. I thought, oh yeah, I'm good around sex education. But the more podcasts I listen to, the more I, come into spaces like this, I'm like, wow, I'm having this realization that I still have this myth in my head, or that belief. So ongoing sex education is so liberatory. Here's what didn't work for me. Shock and disbelief and pity. There's so much about that, and I understand it. When I first started learning about FGM, I would be in a state of shock most of the time. But it's just another form of sexual trauma. Racist assumptions about culture and religion are so unhelpful. So I've heard people say, oh, I know that story. How often, Muslim men, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just not helpful for people to say these kinds of things. It's, racist. Often the words that get used to describe this practice are barbaric, backward, and primitive. And I understand why people say that. Again, it's shocking to think that these things still happen, but these words are quite alienating if you're a survivor. Untrained doctors. So, very few doctors have been trained around FGM, and those who have been trained may have been trained more around type 2 and type 3. So they know how to recognize scarring that looks like that. But, with type 1 and type 4, you might not have any scarring. You might have such a minor scar, for example. So with me, I have a very minor scar that one doctor saw, under bright lights, and she was like, I have no idea how this would happen. This doesn't look like FGM to me. That's very invalidating, of course. Sometimes survivors have a lot of pressure to get involved in public speaking when they're not ready. And I think that's because there's not a lot of survivors speaking out, and those who do it often burn out very quickly because they haven't done their healing work, right? So that was something that didn't work for me until I was ready, and I got myself ready. I just want to tell you about a couple of activist interventions. So I do this sex and relationship advice column. So if you know any survivors, please send them in the direction of this column. We want people to ask their questions, and we basically debunk a lot of myths and try to provide some sex education for FGM survivors. We do a lot of social media campaigns like this one, Be the One campaign, and this one is Be the Grandma who protects her grandchild. We've also got like other iterations of this, be the father, be the mother, be the aunt, all that kind of stuff. And these two women are my own grandmothers. The one on the right is still alive, and she gave her permission to be part of our campaign, which speaks to how change happens in a community. This woman had never heard about any opposition to this issue until a few years ago, and began to get educated and changed her mind about it. If you would like to be an ally, just keep learning. Help us to normalize conversations by breaking silence. You can take part in some events that happen globally. February 6th is the day where we all take part in campaigns. So, think about doing that in your own workplaces, at your schools, in your communities. And here are a couple of organizations you might want to follow. One is the group I've been part of. Another one is a Singapore-based one. And questions. And maybe I'll just stop share. So.
Yes, thank you, Fazana.
Mm-hmm.
So we are taking questions now. Thank you for your brave sharing. Actually, I have a question. I imagine there is a lot of resistance from your community and the work that you do. How are you coping, and how do you deal with that?
There is some resistance for sure. You know, again, because it's so taboo and so silenced, many people just will avoid the conversations. But we do have some very there are pro Khatna activists out there, and they behave very rudely and hostilely on social media. They troll us. So mostly we've just learned how to block those people. And I think how it really, where I get my strength is by having a community of activists, who we all buffer each other. Mostly the most difficult issue is that people just don't want to talk about it. Oh, and there's a question about, does it exist in Canada? Yes. So it happens across the world. And I just want to tell you about how in the US, until 1977, female circumcision was covered by health insurance plans. So these are white Christian women until 1977 who were subjected to this as a way to control their sexuality. And where we think it's happening in North America is in the diasporic communities. So it's all anecdotal. People will say, yes, I know a cutter and I know it's happening, but it's very hard to track down these people. It's illegal, but there's been never any enforcement. And just around the issue of progressiveness. So even in my own community, people could be so progressive, but still do this because they've never been taught that it's harmful. They just think, oh, it's part of our religion.
I wanted to.
We have a question from Madam Rouge. Do you know if there's a correlation between cultures that practice FGM and male circumcision? I.e., they only do it to women and never to men, or are these completely different things?
Thank you. Yeah, this question comes up a lot just around, how are these things related? So we know that male circumcision is also considered to be a social norm, right? Because people do it for religious reasons, but they also do it for non-religious reasons. Like for example, they want, dads will be like, I want my son's penis to look like my penis. That's a social norm, right? And it's a completely unnecessary practice for men as well. And there's been more and more discussion about it's harmful for men too, although it's not talked about in the same way. And lots of men will say, I don't feel that way. It's the issues of bodily autonomy and lack of consent are the same for both practices. And I think there's a growing movement of men who are saying that this is a violation and this is abuse. So where the correlation between where it happens is probably across religious groups, but not completely, right? So for example, Jewish people will do it to the boys, but not to the girls. Some Muslims will do it to the men and not to the girls. Sometimes some Muslims will do it to the men and to the girls. So it's not really a correlation.
Yes, we had a question from Oliver. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I don't know, I was just thinking, to what extent could there be like a legal way to stop this? Do you know what I mean? Because
yes,
it's like if there can be a UN convention against the use of torture or something, can there be something like that cuts across cultures. Yeah.
So globally, this is something that is considered to be a human rights abuse globally. So, you know, like the World Health Organization says that, UNICEF says that, the UN says that, and there is sort of this commitment that by 2030 we're supposed to abolish this practice. I don't know that it's going to happen in 9 years, but that's sort of the commitment that's out there. And I would say in a lot of countries it is illegal, and in some places there's enforcement. So Tanzania is a great example of this, where you know, the teachers talk about it in school, the police will follow up, there are safe houses, there's lots of education. It's still happening, but there are all kinds of interventions. In many countries, if there is a direct report, they will investigate it. So legal interventions are happening, but not enough. I think it's the social interventions that are really going to stop this practice, but it does need to be legal too.
And more of a comment, and I think it's perhaps so there's the FGM, right? But it's being rationalized, but there's a need to control women's sexuality. Why? Don't we just don't we
Such
want
a good
it,
question.
Don't we want it to blossom? You know, in my experience, that's what I want is for to see her in her full whatever. You know, how can it be justified that we need? Why do you even want to? It's even an oxymoron. How can you control sexuality, orgasm? The whole point is not to control it, isn't it? So I don't know how they got away with justifying this. It's ridiculous.
Well, you know, Oliver, you're probably somebody who is, you know, much more like evolved if you've thought about these issues. But if you think back, or any of us think back to before we got sex education, before we started thinking about these issues, we probably had very narrow ideas about what sexuality is supposed to be. And earlier in the chat, I said, you know, we all learned that it's transactional as well. And there are still communities, you know, that believe that virginity is a thing. You know, now, most of us are like, virginity is not a thing. But, you know, so there's all kinds of really outdated notions out there still about sexuality. So, yeah, that we somehow need to protect our girls by controlling their sexuality is still there.
By hurting them, it's wow.
Yes, by hurting. Although they would say we're not hurting, we're just doing this little cut, is what they would say.
But from what I've learned, the clitoris is the thing in the universe with the most number of nerve endings. So how can that be not painful?
Yes, it's absolutely painful. Yeah. And then when you think about type 2 and type 3, which are more extreme versions of damage and harm, you know, in those cases, it's a bit more obvious. We are actually trying to harm. In my community, they can rationalize and say, no big deal, it's so small. It's not. Again, as I mentioned, it can happen under duress, right? So it can be quite damaging. Yeah. Martha has said, our sexuality is powerful and people get scared of power. Yeah.
Can you say something or repeat about pleasure and FGM? Survivors can still have pleasure. Should we call them survivors or victims? That's a question from Martha.
You know, it really depends on the person, right? So I think a lot of people I know like to be called a survivor. Some don't even want to identify as either victim or survivor. They just don't want to be even thinking of themselves in relation to this abuse. But yes, so sexuality. So some of the things that have come up in conversations and also in the Dear Masi column is that, you know, because the clitoris is a multi-branch thing, even if you had damage to the external part, and you might not have, or it might have been minimal, still there are so many ways to access pleasure. And that stat that I put out there, that 33% said that it impacted their sexuality negatively. That's a whole lot of other people who don't feel that it did, who feel that their sexuality was not harmed, that they can still have a positive sexuality. So yeah, not necessarily. I know one survivor who is a type 3 survivor. So, you know, the most damage done to her. And she has a lot of scar tissue. And she just talks about how it's slow sexuality that she needs in order to start to feel safe in her body and have ownership in her body and even to lubricate. And so, yes, of course, you can have pleasure. You might just need to approach it the way any sexual abuse survivor might have to approach it, through a lot of care and mindfulness. Is there rehabilitation?
Karen, yes.
Mm-hmm. So the question is there rehabilitation? So, you know, I would say trauma therapy, psychological trauma therapy is probably the biggest thing that people need to be doing. But let's say your clitoris was cut, the external part of your clitoris was cut. There is a form of surgery that basically helps to, I'm going to get the word wrong, but it helps to bring more of the internal part of the clitoris out. And so it's almost like a reconstruction. And people can also have a reconstruction to external parts of the vulva as well. This can be quite liberatory. People can feel so much better about their bodies as a result of it. And I think they need to do their psychological work for any of it to manifest the way they want.
Okay, Martha had a question earlier. What
yes, about medicalization. Yes,
to medical doctors who perform FGM who say they better do it, otherwise it will be done in more dangerous ways elsewhere.
Yeah, and there are places where it's primarily done in a medicalized way, and I would say that's in Singapore, right? And that's in some parts of Indonesia, and then even in India, there are some doctors who believe this. So, you know, what I would say to those doctors is you know, you took an oath to do no harm, and you have power and authority, and you could be using that power and authority to say to a parent, don't do this. This is why you don't do this. I will report you if you do this. You could go to jail. So I think that's how they need to do it. And yeah, I think these are probably doctors who don't have enough sex education themselves, who think that this is somehow okay. Yeah, and some people also think it's more okay to do it to newborns than to do it to small children because they won't remember. But, you know, the body holds the trauma. And this also speaks to male circumcision. I think the body of, you know, baby boys, they hold the trauma too in their bodies. Yes, there's Kat said, when the mind forgets, the body will certainly remember. The body remembers. The body doesn't know how old we are.
The body keeps the score. That's that book, right?
Yes.
That's a great book. Yeah.
Bessel van der Kolk. Yeah.
Van der Kolk. Yeah, it's a very helpful book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do we have any more questions?
Oh, just a comment. I hope this is one of those things like slavery and all the stupid things we've thought over history that we somehow let go, you know? Mm-hmm. But resistance to same-sex marriage, it's, you know, hopefully, yeah. So maybe, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no one talks about it. You're right. Actually, I haven't talked about it with anyone apart from now. It's weird, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the more we talk about it, the more we're able to change this. Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, if we have no questions, then I think we can move on. But before that, thank you so much, Fazana, for sharing something that is so personal as well. I think the presenters The three presenters today have shared very personal stories with us, and personally, I feel inspired by their bravery and also their ability to bring their vulnerability here today. Yeah, so Martha, do you want to stop the recording before we move on?
Yeah, so I just want to say that, replace pin, we are going to stop the recording for a while to do a fun activity. And we are committed to ending at 9, which is at 24 minutes time. So we will just do a short one. We'll go to breakout room, and then we will do our show and tell. So today's show and tell is Inti Mina, which is a series of menstrual cups that are available at our sponsor. So the idea was that at every Sugar and Spice Monthly Talk, it is very overwhelming that there are so many products out there. So we'll just focus on one product. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording for now, and then we'll come back. Okay, so do we want to do the show and tell first in case we overrun? Is it okay, everyone, that I do the show and tell first, and then we do the fun activity? And all of you are wondering what's the fun activity. Don't run away, because it's supposed to be a fun activity.
Yeah, something that Martha came up with.
It's not I came out with. I'm not such a genius. I really am not. But I have done it, you know, in my classes. So I thought, hey, you know what? We are progressive people. We should do it, because it may change your life. Okay, so let's talk about Inti Mina. It's a series of menstrual products, and they have different names. And they're all made of high-grade, medical-grade silicone. There are many types of menstrual cups, many different brands. And this is my favorite because it's the softest. If you compare with other brands that I've come across, they are not as soft. And the ones that I've come across, two different brands that I've come across, they actually use food-grade silicone. And food-grade silicone is not 100% safe. They are also not as soft as the ones that we have here. Okay, so they have the beginner trainer ones. So this is called Lily One. And it comes with a hook at the end. And they provide the world's first foldable menstrual cup, so you can fold them. And you can compare the size by putting them against each other. So this one is the smallest, the one with a hook at the end. And then there's the next one, which comes with a little stem. This one that I'm holding is dark pink. They have the light pink. So the light pink are actually smaller. So they have size A and size B. And then we have the bigger one, which is, it looks a little bit like a drinking cup with a stem at the end. And it actually has this ridge around it, this rim, to help prevent the menstrual blood from flowing out so easily. So how exactly do you put it on? So the most easy way, there are many ways, but the easiest way is what we call a V-fold. So at any part of the rim of the cup, you just press down and you fold down, and it creates a V shape. So what happens with this V shape? Then you insert it at the entrance to the vagina. And at the end of the vaginal canal, it will pop like what just happened to the end of my hand. And it will sit at the end of your vaginal canal. It doesn't sit in your vagina, it sits at the end of the vaginal canal. And it can stay in your body for up to 12 hours. So the first question I get asked when I start to talk about, okay, this is how you put it on. Most people will start to ask, what about when it overflows, when it leaks? For myself, I can feel it, just like some people who have menstruation. They can feel when their menstruation is here. They can feel the trickling of the blood flow down their vaginal canal. Similarly, when I'm wearing the menstrual cup and I feel overflow, I can also feel this trickling. So what you can do if you are still learning how to get used to the menstrual cup is you can still wear your sanitary pad. And so some people, why, since I'm already wearing the pad, why would I want to also use this? You will go through less pads. This helps to also prevent the smell. To release the cup, you just press down a little bit, and then you can pull the cup out of your vaginal canal, and then you hold the blood, and then you can actually pour it into the toilet bowl. You can wash it in the toilet. And when it says overflow, yes, you can still use a sanitary pad. And after a few months of trying this, it took me a few months to really get used to it. Then it becomes really easy because you get to know your body cycle and your flow and how heavy it is and when to wear the pad or when not to use it, because you have also learned how to apply it properly so that it doesn't like move around and tilt over. So one way of making sure that it doesn't tilt or move around too much is once it's at the end of your vaginal canal, you can pull it down. So when you pull it down, it prevents any air from going into your vagina, so it creates more of a suction. And to wash your cup, you can just use water and soap. A lot of people at the start of the so a lot of people at the start of the session, wait, you're not a mute. You're the culprit. I don't know how to mute her. Okay, so at the start of this menstruation, you can actually boil the cup. You can boil it to really prevent any bacteria, any dust, and when you boil it, it kills all the bacteria for sure. And of course, don't insert it immediately into the vagina. You do have to wait for it to cool down. And this is the reason why some people may wish to have a few different cups. There was this lady who came to the shop to ask, so if it's because she's very, very particular about cleanliness. So she actually said that, okay, fine, it's full, she's emptied it and now it's dirty and she doesn't want to go out of the public toilet to the basin and wash her hands or wash the cup. So what can she do? So what she can do is she can have spare ones and they are foldable. So she can have another one on standby, which is already clean, and then she can take that out. So they already come with the different casing. So yeah, so that's menstrual cups. They have gained a lot of popularity, especially in the last 2 years, because there are a lot of different brands that are coming up, and a lot of people are talking about it. And people are also talking about period poverty, people who can't really afford menstrual products like sanitary pads because it's expensive. So for our neighboring countries around us, menstrual cups is an affordable way because they don't have to keep buying products, and this can be used for up to 10-20 years. So yeah, Fazana is saying I've been using one for 20 years and took a few days to get used to it, but after that it was intuitive. So my colleague Elaine, she says she's very lazy. So what she does is she actually just put some lubricant so that it could just go into her vaginal canal very easily, very quickly, within a few seconds. So some of the customers will say things like, well, all you need to do is just relax and just insert it, and it should just glide, because the menstrual blood is also a form of lubrication. However, Elaine said, oh, because I'm lazy, so I just use the lubricant, and then that will really ensure that there's no pain. So that's also another way. So a lot of moms who come to the shop, they would say things like, oh, this is not suitable for my daughters because they're virgins, or they it's messy, or they wouldn't be able to manage it. I think it's a matter of understanding that this is actually access to our own bodies, the autonomy to our own bodies, and it's also by connecting with your genitals, touching yourself, touching your menstrual blood, which is not dirty. you start to reclaim your menstruation, and it becomes something that you can look forward to and actually have connection and relationship over, versus like, oh, this is like the monthly curse, or certainly negative messages around our period. So I feel that products like this, in whatever way, the different options, it's just about what works for you. And of course, as you know, it's good for the environment. It's not dirty, it's clean, hygienic, convenient, and saves money. So end of the day, I'm not here to say buy menstrual cup. I'm not here to say that. I'm just here to share that this is just an option that people who are more educated will feel more comfortable with, because they hear about it, they talk about it, they see it, they touch it, they feel it, and they are more likely to use it. To be very honest with you, even though I'm a sex educator and I knew all the benefits of menstrual cup, it took me about a year to finally use it, because I realized I couldn't talk about them without not being a user. So it took me 1 year to even pluck up the courage to even try it, because I was really concerned about the pain. I was concerned about the inconvenience. So for Farzana, it took her a few days to get used to it. For me, it took me a few months to get used to it. It took me like 3 months to kind of get a hang of it. And the first time I was able to insert it successfully, it took me a while. I was so proud of myself, and I felt so good about myself. I felt like I've crossed another hurdle in my life. Like I've become more adult. Like what other people can do, I can do too, kind of thing. So yeah, it really changed my relationship with my period. Even though by the time I had my period for like more than 20 years, I still felt that it was a reclaiming of my body and my relationship with my menstruation. So it's really hard to put a label to it, but I really felt good about it. Felt good about myself. Yeah. Okay. So having said that, I've come to the end of show and tell. Didn't want to go on and on too long. So I'd like to thank Pink Lifestyle for the sponsorship. And you can go to the discount code that's Love Sugar Spice to get a 15% off their website. So 15% is quite a lot. It's really quite a big discount, because yeah, even other affiliates also get maximum 15%. Yes, so okay, I'm gonna stop the recording, and then now we'll do our fun activity for those of you who are still here. So thank you so much for coming for Sugar and Spice, and thank our presenters, and thank you, Wen, for being the host, for doing such a good job, for staying, and thank you to those who came. Okay, never mind. That's my
Thank
joke
you, everyone.
again. Yeah. So see you again next month. So the theme next month is going to be on Pride. So it's Pride Month. June is Pride Month. So we will have different presenters talking about on the GLBTQIA spectrum, talking about their relationship with their sexuality, their sexual orientation, reclaiming who they are. Thank you.